Welcome, everyone. My name is Paige, and we are here as part of Deschutes Public Library's virtual programming. I am joined here today by our two wonderful presenters, Jules and Robin, to tell us all about how you can take the mystery out of going vegan. I am joined today by two lovely presenters. I'm going to go ahead and introduce them, and then they are going to take us away and get us started. Robin Quartz, along with a master's in humane education, she also holds an MA in thanatology, a BS in psychology, a BS in gerontology, and wait, there's more, a certificate in plant-based nutrition through eCornell. And Jules Schnedeke, along with a master's in humane education, she holds a BA in creative writing from the New School. She has been project manager professional, PMP certified since 2011. Robin and Jules, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you to tell us all about this wonderful subject.
Great. Thank you so much. And thanks for the intro. So I'm Robin and we are with Plant-Based Point, and we're going to talk about taking the mystery out of going vegan. So we have bad news for you. It really just means you're going to be eating tofu and kale and beans and sprouts. Just kidding. The hidden gem behind our first screen here is this beautiful lasagna. So what we're going to talk about today in this presentation is what you're eating that's already vegan, how you can make transitions to eating more vegan, recognizing no, you're not going to just eat tofu and kale and whatnot. There's tons of vegan options out there. So we want to keep it really fun and go through this presentation and hopefully inspire some change.
And Paige just did such a wonderful job of introducing us. So we'll keep this really quick. As you heard, I have a background in creative writing and project management. I live in Bend, Oregon, and I met Robin while we were studying to get our master's degrees from the Institute for Humane Education.
Yeah, so shortly after Jules and I finished up with our graduate degrees, we reconnected and created Plant-Based Point. We both have a similar, sort of idea about how education around eating can really help make change. For me, it was kind of family focused. I have two kids. I know Jules gets to live in Lucky Bend. I live in Des Moines, Iowa, although I'm originally from Baltimore. Myself and my kids were all vegan and plant-based. And so it's really important for me to just continue with that message. And what that message for me is, and what the message is in my home, is the idea of matching your plate with your heart. And I think the first time I said this out loud, it didn't really make any sense until I started to really dig into what was I getting at. So for me, it's always been, how do I tell someone I love them and care about them? I make them food, whether it's a beautiful pot pie or strawberry salad. I love to show people I love them through food. And what better way than through really healthy food, yummy food, food that's good for your health, good for the planet's health, good for our animal friends' health. So the idea that when you're sitting down at the table, connecting with friends and family, the food that you're serving should sort of meet that same idea of connection and compassion. So matching your plate with your heart is a pretty firm foundation in why I eat the way that I do, and feed my kids what I feed them. A common question, if anybody's ever made any food change in their life, especially if you're beginning to eat vegan, you're going to be asked about all sorts of things. But I think the biggest one is protein. I know both Jules and I have buckets of stories of friends and families expressing concern over what about protein, what about vitamins, this and that. And so it's really important, excuse me, for us to make sure we're addressing that you can eat vegan or plant-based and meet all of your nutritional requirements. Jules and I also want to make it really clear we're not medical professionals. So if you're making any sort of food change, making sure you're consulting with your physician or whoever you go to for dietary guidance. We also kind of want to take a pause and just talk about the words vegan and plant-based. Sometimes we use them interchangeably, and we know that not everybody does. For us, it's just really important not to get caught up in sort of the labels of it. For some people, plant-based refers strictly to how they eat, and vegan refers to maybe more their ethics or their lifestyle. Both Jules and I believe that whether you're vegan or plant-based, it does extend beyond what you're eating. And so we just kind of wanted to get that out in case anybody had a question about why we say vegan or why we say plant-based. And just to get into some of the sort of nitty-gritty about some of the nutrients, excuse me. when you're eating plant-based, the goal is to eat nutrient-dense food. So pretty much the foods that you see on this slide would all be considered nutrient-dense. And what that means is they are high in vitamins, high in minerals, and low in calories. A side note to when you are eating vegan and plant-based is you're not going to be eating anything with cholesterol, because cholesterol only comes from our animal-based foods. So some examples of plant-based foods that are considered nutrient-dense would be avocado, kale, potatoes, blueberries, nuts, beans. Protein, being that big buzzword that a lot of people get asked about, is also really important for us to make sure we're addressing. So just to kind of put some numbers out there, when people start asking, if you're not eating meat or any sort of animal-based product, where are you getting your protein? One of the best answers we like to give is peas. Everybody eats peas, whether you threw them off your plate when you were little or you've learned to love them as you got older. 1 cup of peas is going to get you 8.5 grams of protein. For a lot of people, that can kind of surprise them that this tiny little cup of green little miracles will give you that much protein. But it's true. You will find a lot of protein in your fruits and vegetables. Another really good example are lentils, and lentils also can get put into so many different dishes, but 1 cup of lentils will actually get you 17 grams of protein, which is a lot if you think about it. Building on that, when I say it's a lot, if you don't know how much you're supposed to have in a day, that might not mean much to you. So on average, a woman would require 53 grams of protein per day. So that kind of puts it into context. We hear a lot about protein. People advertise it. It kind of became a buzzword. And so unfortunately, the reality is most people eat twice as much protein as what they need in a day. So it's important to just know what you're supposed to be getting and where the best sources are. Which brings us to this. So the reason protein is sort of weighing down our seesaw is that 5% of people don't get enough protein, whereas 95% of people are not getting enough fiber. So a lot of attention gets put on protein, but in reality, fiber is a bigger issue because most people are deficient in fiber. So I started to look into the why behind that. And the reality is most people just don't eat enough leafy greens and beans to get the amount of fiber that they need in a day. If you're eating mostly protein-based meals, animal-based products don't have fiber in them. You need fruits and vegetables to get fiber. So the next time somebody asks you where you get your protein, I always like to ask back, I'll tell you when you tell me where you got your fiber. So what about eggs, honey, and dairy? So I talked a little bit about, if we say plant-based or vegan, we're sort of talking about food choices. Some folks will think, what about being a vegetarian, or how does it all kind of come into play? And so it's really important for Jules and I to talk about eggs, honey, and dairy, because they just kind of fall into the gray zone of, are eggs okay? Is honey okay? And of course, dairy. So the long and short of it is, these are all animal-based products, so they wouldn't be things that we would eat, if we're eating a vegan or plant-based lifestyle. Eggs being the first one I'll talk about, just from a health perspective, eggs have a significant amount of cholesterol in them. And so just from a health perspective, they're truly not a healthy choice, especially not to start your day, with a boatload of cholesterol. There's a ton of easy swaps for eggs now, and I know we're going to get into some of the fun vegan alternatives, so we'll get to those later. When I think about dairy, my first thought is gosh, if you've been in a grocery store in the last couple of years, the non-dairy section has just exploded. So there's just so many more options. And one of the biggest reasons myself and Jules, we don't consume dairy, cow's milk, is it's truly not meant for people. Cow's milk is meant for baby cows. And so we love our oat milk and it does the trick. So a lot of people will say, okay, well, I get my eggs from, the local farmer down the road, or the backyard chickens, or I only buy my meat from the humane farmer down the road. And the true reality is that 99% of animal-based products come from factory farming. So even if you think you are getting things from these local humane resources, the sad reality is that 99% of all animal products come from factory farms. So Jules and I have put together a number of question and answer short videos on our YouTube. So we wanted to just plug that here. We talk a little bit more in detail about dairy and honey. and a few other, common questions, where you get your protein, things like that. So we go into more detail than we have time for today. So we definitely recommend checking out our YouTube channel and going through some of the Q&As. And then, as I mentioned, I've got some kiddos. So my two little guys are both vegan. And as you can see, love spinach straight out of the carton. I can barely keep produce in the house. And if anybody else has kids, they eat so much and it's crazy. And I'm worried what happens when they're teenagers and bigger. But the reason we want to talk about this is there can be some, hesitation to, will my kids get the nutrients that they need if they're eating this way? Will they be able to go to a birthday party? What will happen when they're in school and for school lunches? So I'm here to report back that both my kids are thriving. We make their lunches every day. We aren't fortunate to live in a school district that offers a plant-based or vegan option. So we do send lunches with them. But they truly enjoy produce. And I think most kids start out really enjoying fruits and vegetables. If you think about the first foods you give your kids when they're little, it's almost always pureed fruit, pureed vegetable, or even rice and cereal and things like that. It is these sort of accidentally vegan items. Kids also love beans. And I don't know why that's not more exploited when you're thinking about how to feed your kids and what to feed them. That's really easy. But they're sort of like blueberry in shape, and they'll just pop them and they love them. And there's so much protein and fiber in beans. They're so good for kids. So in terms of plant-based kiddos, it is definitely okay. And then I spoke briefly at the beginning about the why behind it. So an important thing in my house is to just make sure both my kids understand the why behind we eat certain things. We never want the kids to feel like they're, missing out or they're being restricted from something. So we talk about what we can do and what we do eat. And then when we think about activities to take our kids out on, we want to make sure that's also just sort of fitting into that why. So, this won't apply to everybody if you're only making changes, in terms of your kitchen and maybe not beyond that. For my house, we definitely support our local farm sanctuaries. We want to make sure we're supporting animal rescue leagues. Any place that supports a vegan lifestyle, we want to make sure we're kind of giving back to or visiting or supporting in some way. And then this way, of course, my kids get to see the animals and kind of interact a bit more and learn more about the why. So this picture was from Farm Sanctuary in New York a couple years ago. And this is one of my favorite quotes, and I'm going to read it to you. So it says, "You cannot get through a single day without having an impact on the world around you. What you do makes a difference, and you have to decide what kind of difference you want to make." I think for a lot of folks, if you're thinking about making a change, it can feel overwhelming if you're feeling like this isn't going to make a big enough difference. When Jules and I kind of started putting our heads together about plant-based point, it can definitely feel like there's a big wave kind of crashing down on you when you're making these smaller decisions. For us, we know that, eating a vegan diet is better for our planet, it's better for our health, and it's obviously better for our animal friends. And so each tiny decision does add up and make a big difference.
And as we're talking about making changes in the kitchen, if you're feeling a little bit trepidatious, we want to really uncover the mystery of what you can eat and what you probably already have been eating your entire life that happens to be vegan. So for example, I'm sure a lot of this on this page, if not all of it, looks really familiar to you. If you have ever bought any jam or nut or seed butter or bagel or store-bought pasta, jars of tomato sauce, chickpeas, rice, you have already got a lot of plant-based products in your kitchen and probably right now. So we encourage people to not think of this as a total undoing of all the things that you're used to and that are familiar to you, but more like putting your plant-based goggles on. So I was very overwhelmed back in 2016 when I went vegan. I went vegan overnight. I suddenly was in the grocery store with no idea where to start. I didn't have a single vegan friend at that time. And that's a big motivation for me with Plant-Based Point, is to reassure other people that are looking to make similar changes that it really doesn't have to be scary. And in fact, there are so many things you probably already know and love at your local grocery store that just so happen to be vegan. So you can see on this slide here, everything from falafel, hummus, potatoes, pretzels, avocados, coconut milk, French fries, beans. I mean, it goes on and on and on. And one of the things we encourage too is to do what works for you and definitely experiment. And there's no prescribed way to go about making some plant-based changes. My sister, for example, she is not vegan, but she has started experimenting with some plant-based substitutions. And the 3 things you see on the slide here, you can find these 3 brands pretty much anywhere, from your Walmart to your Target to any grocery store. And so these staples for her milk, her mayonnaise, and her butter are her new favorites. And she has bought them because she actually likes the taste better. The price is pretty comparable. And she knows that these little daily small changes actually make a big difference. So we definitely encourage you to think of that too as an option of a really pretty easy place to start. And here is one of my grocery hauls that I took a photo for my family just to show them how many products I was scooping up that in many cases were just accidentally vegan, probably look really familiar to you, especially like those tortilla chips and the wheat thins and the Oreos. So there are just so many options out there. Every time I go to the grocery stores here in Bend, every single time, there are more new plant-based options than I can even keep up with for the taste test that we love to do.
And I just wanted to jump in. I have the same sort of feeling about snapping a picture of my grocery shopping trip. And so this was over the summer, a grocery shopping trip that I went on. So we'll do a little bit less sometimes of the, tofurkey and imitation meat and cheese items, and try to really make our meals out of like truly plant-based products. And so I think for some folks, they could look at that picture and be a little overwhelmed, like, what in the world am I going to make besides just like a big salad and like, I don't know, a bunch of apples and tons of celery. And, it can kind of feel weird to look at it all and think, how is this going to turn into a meal? And so something I like to encourage people to do is just to really rethink your plate. So rather than looking at it and saying, okay, on my plate, I need a starch and a grain and a protein, just start thinking of it as I need just these nutrient dense foods that have the vitamins, the minerals, the protein, the fiber, stuff that kind of overlaps. And so you're not, kind of isolating one nutrient per food item. So that entire, spread turned into, out of that, we made beet balls, we made a ton of celery juice, we made quite a few different meals out of all of that. So just rethinking your plate and what you can make.
And then speaking of those beautiful, bright, fresh produce that can fill your kitchen, we like to remind people too that part of the reason we like the foods we like are, it's partly tradition and how we grew up, but generally to make anything taste good, you're using plant-based products. So all of your citrus and your herbs and those dried spices in your cupboard, they're all plant-based. And that's exactly what we need to pop up the flavor of any of the foods that we love. So you can take those same methods and seasonings and apply them to the plant-based version and come up with something that has a really similar flavor profile. And so speaking of course, one of the biggest questions we get, and I think it still has a little bit, creates this barrier into going plant-based, is this idea that, oh gosh, I hate tofu. You're going to make me eat tofu. Well, first of all, you can definitely be plant-based without tofu, but I am here to tell you that there are simple ways to make tempeh and tofu and plant-based proteins really, really delicious right at home. And if you have ever cooked with chicken or chicken breasts, think of tofu very similarly, where you're not going to bring home the package and eat it right out of the package. Chicken would make you sick. And in the case of tofu, totally bland, it's spongy, it's weird. I don't like it at all right out of the container. And I don't know why they put it that way in salad bars and introduce people to tofu that way. It's crazy to me. So what you have to do basically is what you would do with your chicken breast. Or you got to prep it, you got to slice it up, put some marinade on it, let it soak for 20, 30 minutes, maybe even overnight, and then throw it on the grill, pop it in the oven for 20 or 30 minutes, you flip it halfway. And then you've got this like texture rich, flavorful, delicious, really much more of a meat-like substance than if you just eaten the tofu out of the package. And Robin and I, in our effort to show how simple some of this is, no fancy equipment required for pressing tofu whatsoever. You'll see over on the right my super duper fancy method where I just slice up a package of tofu into 3 little cutlets, and I weave a dish towel in between, put them between 2 plates, and then just stack something heavy on top for 20 or 30 minutes. I use my Keurig coffee maker kind of perched precariously in the corner. And then while that's pressing, I whip up my marinade, or you could just use even a store-bought pesto or salad dressing or barbecue sauce as your marinade. You don't even have to make it from scratch, but it only takes about 20 or 30 minutes to press tofu. Or you can buy the vacuum sealed packages of it, where it's just, you kind of shake off the excess water, and that's pretty much good to go already. It just won't quite absorb as much marinade, but that does cut out the extra step of pressing it. And speaking of equipment and how we don't use anything fancy to press our tofu, if you are looking to maybe invest a little bit, and Robin and I always say, get in the kitchen, see what you already have, see what you like before you start spending lots of money. But we both agree that our Vitamix high-powered blenders are something we probably are going to be buried with. We just love it so much, and it's going to last that long. My blender there on the left, I have had for probably 15 years. I got it for $300, and it shows no signs of slowing down. It is absolutely wonderful if you want to start getting into making sauces and soups and things that start with a blended nut like a raw cashew, because that high powered blender will get it really, really creamy. But you can easily work around not having a high powered blender. And then I also love my Instapot, because this does everything under the sun. I think it might even do my laundry if I asked it to, but I love to cook my grains and beans myself. It's so much cheaper to just buy dried beans and grains in bulk and cook them at home, but also then you can add whatever flavor you want to it. And it is so much better, especially than buying it in a can. I have noticed a big taste difference. So I use my Instapot all the time, and you can set it and forget it while you do other stuff. So it's great if you are thinking you might want to invest in some stuff.
And we also kind of wanted to take a moment to give a plug. So not only if you're hesitant to invest, money into your kitchen because you're not quite sure, if you're ready to dive in, we would offer the same suggestion for cookbooks and materials that resources that you want to look up. So we are big fans of utilizing our local libraries, for presentations such as this, or to just wander through the shelves, go through the cookbook section, start checking out things and figuring out what you like before you make financial investments into things. Buying a bunch of cookbooks you're not going to use, or like Jules said, a blender, and then you realize, oh, I don't like that. So just being really mindful and not jumping right in, just testing the waters.
And speaking of cookbooks, so the next few photos you're going to see are from our cookbook. We'll talk a little bit about that later, but we have a plant-based cookbook filled with easy recipes. And so part of taking the mystery out of going plant-based, we just want to show you a few of these recipes. They're probably going to look very familiar to you, and I'm going to unveil what makes them vegan, so that just to give you a little taste, no pun intended, of how you can still eat these amazing, familiar, rich, delicious, flavorful foods that you've known your whole life, just veganized. And so this first one here is some fried tofu. I just pressed tofu, coated it in cornstarch, fried it, easy peasy. And the sauce is a General Tso's sauce. And that is basically an accidentally vegan recipe, believe it or not. And the only thing that might make it not vegan when you go out to eat is a fish sauce stirred in. And I think most of us can agree we could live without that. So it's a really, really easy one to veganize, and it is so delicious. And the next one of my favorites is vodka sauce. And I grew up in New Jersey. The Italian food is out of this world. I don't think I could live in a world without vodka sauce. And this entire recipe, I believe, is only 5 ingredients. And instead of heavy cream, the only switch out is a can of coconut milk. And if that sounds a little scary to you, we can pretty much assure you it does not taste coconutty at all. What it does is just add this rich, creamy fat to the sauce. So you really don't miss the heavy cream. And coconut milk you can find it everywhere. It's so inexpensive. I just saw a sale, I think it's $1.50 a can, and it's just 1 can for this whole recipe. It makes a lot. So that is a really easy swap out. And then last but not least are our chocolate mousse truffles. And again, hail to the coconut milk. This one uses coconut cream, which you can almost always find right next to the coconut milk. Sometimes it's a little bit more expensive. And then the chocolate that I use is the semi-sweet chocolate chunks from Trader Joe's. I think it's $1.79 a bag, and they're accidentally vegan and so good, so affordable. And those are the only swap outs to make a delicious peanut butter dessert like this. And certainly you could use a nut or seed butter if you want to swirl that in. So the whole chocolate peanut butter world is definitely still very available to you on a plant-based diet. Something else I don't think I could live without. And one of my favorite things that I realized somewhere down the line of going vegan was I hate to waste things. So this was so exciting to me. When I was marinating some vegetables and some tofu and tempeh, I realized all that extra marinade that was there, I didn't have to dump it because it wasn't contaminated. I could just stir in some vegan mayonnaise and turn it into this creamy dressing. And so this is also from our cookbook, our roasted butternut squash fried shallot salad, which I think tastes amazing with a creamy balsamic. And as you're trying some new things, and maybe you've tried a couple things already that you just didn't love, and so that's making the whole idea of going plant-based or going partially plant-based overwhelming or intimidating or not very appealing, I like to think of it as switching from one brand to another. I grew up with Heinz, so whenever I taste Hunt's ketchup, I always have my brain kind of hiccups and I think, ooh, this doesn't taste right. But I know it's just because it's a different brand, and Hunt's ketchup, I'm sure people would go head to head on which one is better. So certainly one isn't better than the other. It's just a matter of getting used to it. And speaking of, the research shows that it can take up to 7 times of trying something new in order to get used to it.
And along with that, so something that's really interesting that Jules and I learned as we were doing some research for our presentation and for our graduate degree was this idea that your taste buds actually sort of renew themselves every 1 to 2 weeks. As you get older, it slows down. So older people do naturally lose some taste. But in reality, most people who eat sort of the standard American diet, so foods that are high in salt, sugar, and fat, they experience a lot of inflammation in their body, which actually slows down your taste bud renewal process. So if you're trying something 7 times, but you're also maybe a person who has eaten a lot of salty foods their whole life, it's actually going to take a little bit of time because it's almost like you have to detox and learn a new flavor. So if you haven't had broccoli in years, it's still really good. I suggest you give it a shot, give it a week. But just know that it's going to take a minute for you to really get that flavor back if it's been a while since you've eaten a certain way.
And another thing we like to talk about when you're considering making changes in the kitchen, especially because we live in a social media world and you go on Instagram, you go on Facebook, and everybody's meals and dishes look perfect. And they might look like this picture, which is a photo from the cover of our cookbook. But what we like to encourage you to remember is, I'm going to show you what it took to get this perfect looking photo, is something very not perfect. And if you follow Robin and I on social media, we like to share our kitchen wins, but also our kitchen woes. We definitely make mistakes. We try things we don't like all the time, or they just don't come out the way we thought they would. We made sure to put pictures of every recipe in our cookbook because we know if you can't see what it's supposed to look like, how are you supposed to get from point A to point B? And so, yeah, behind the scenes, things can be a little bit messy. And I think I mentioned this earlier, we don't have a prescribed way you have to go about incorporating plant-based changes into your life. Whatever works for you. There's no, you've got to eat broccoli every single day, or you've got to do this or that, or it has to be all or nothing. Absolutely not. Do some experimenting and figure out what works for you, and know that there's no such thing as perfection.
So what about travel? So Jules and I recently did some travel over the summer. And although, it may look different, a lot of it's the same in terms of just having yourself prepared and ready. When it comes to travel, even before eating vegan, I was always pretty careful about just packing snacks for the road. I really don't like to make extended stops. And most of the stuff you find at rest stops is just kind of, like a greasy fast food type thing, and just not food that I would want to eat, if I knew I was going to be in the car all day. So every time we go on a trip with me, and those are my kiddos there, we pack a cooler, and it's always really simple stuff. Just cut up celery or a Tupperware with fruit. We did some wraps for that road trip. And then I have like some hummus there and some non-dairy cream cheese. So we stopped for bagels for breakfast. And then we ended up stopping at a rest stop on our way to where we were going and having a nice lunch. But while we're driving, it's still really easy to just open up and get out what we need. So it doesn't take a lot of time to do that. And if you think about it, it actually saves time on your trip. You're going to be making less stops, and the stops you do make, you're going to sit down and eat your food versus running in and out multiple times.
And I have definitely done a lot of road tripping in the last few years. I mentioned I'm from New Jersey. I'm living in Bend, Oregon now, which means I have actually driven back and forth a number of times over the last couple of years. So I like to think I've got the travel food down. And one of the things I talk about, to the point that my friends make fun of me, is my love of the tortilla. And there's just so many wonderful things about tortillas. One of them being that you can definitely find a tortilla that meets your preference. And if you have any dietary restrictions, if you're doing low carb or gluten-free, there's a tortilla out there for everyone. And it pretty much makes everything portable. I bring them on airplanes as well. I think Uncle Jesse knows he's in this picture because he's making lots of noise behind me right now. So I'm sorry if you can hear my dog at any point. He loves sweet potatoes. So I always grab a bag of those when I'm on the road, because I'm usually staying in motels that have microwaves. So if you've got access to a mini fridge and a microwave, the possibilities are endless. And I will show you some of the stuff I scooped up before a road trip. So of course, beloved tortillas. I try to find some non-leaky things. So instead of pickles, once I got like a dill pickle hummus as a spread, because that's pretty non-leaky. Avocados could go either way, but sometimes those will work. And definitely those plant-based cheeses and meats are really good inside a wrap. And you can eat them on the road as you're going. You don't even need to stop necessarily. And then here is a little snapshot of being on the road with my mom. That's Babs. And talk about keeping things simple. Those two cans on the left are accidentally vegan products from Trader Joe's. I think they're both $2 or $3, and a bottle of wine from Trader Joe's. And one night, the line at the restaurant by the hotel was really long, and we realized we were exhausted, and hey, why spend extra money? We just came home, popped open some cans and a bottle of wine, and we had a great meal. And then one of the other nights we were on the road, again, if you have a microwave, so many possibilities. I'll sometimes grab a couple bags of like frozen chicken nuggets or meatballs. And I'm not sure why I had parsley on this trip, but I know I had a bag of pine nuts. So I microwaved up some meatballs and tomato sauce and pine nuts for my mom. And as you could see by that smile, she was thrilled. There definitely doesn't have to be a lot of compromising with eating plant-based on the road. And then the next morning, I made some non-leaky sandwiches using some veggie burgers and some tofurkey slices that we had the next day. So, and it was all just stuff we kept in the cooler, and we were stopping each night. So we were able to keep things cold in the mini fridges along the way. And lest you think that there's any environment in which you cannot eat delicious vegan food, this was a 2-night backpacking trip I went on a couple years ago. And I made 2 of the recipes from our cookbook, the peanut sauce and the cashew spread, and brought those up the mountain along with some tortillas and some fresh fruit and avocado. And we had delicious quesadillas, some soba noodles with peanut sauce the next night. I have found with plant-based foods like that, having them not refrigerated for a couple of nights was absolutely fine. We had no issues, and everybody was pretty thrilled, I think.
Okay, and so now that we're not traveling anymore because summer has winded down, we can get ready for some holidays. So this is kind of timely, Thanksgiving, Christmas, and whatnot around the corner. There's always those polls that come out around Thanksgiving, and it's, what's your favorite Thanksgiving dish? And 9 times out of 10, it's a side dish. It's the mac and cheese, the stuffing, the green bean casserole. It's pretty rarely the turkey. And so I say that because, when you are vegan, you do kind of live on the sides sometimes in terms of what you're going to eat when you go to a holiday. I have hosted countless Thanksgivings, Christmas, birthday parties, Memorial Day things, 4th of July things, all sorts of things. And they're always vegan, and nobody leaves hungry. So you can absolutely host, your family holiday stuff and not worry that, no one's going to show up because you don't have a turkey on the table. There are a few, actual, vegan, like holiday roasts and things like that Jules is going to talk about. But in terms of finding maybe a more plant-based alternative for your holiday centerpiece meal, you can do a stuffed butternut squash. It ends up looking very pretty and using your stuffing and all of the similar ingredients and flavors. And to Jules' point, it does come down to the seasoning. Those are the real flavors of the holiday that we think about. And then 46 million. So the reason we put this number up is 46 million turkeys are slaughtered every year for Thanksgiving. So to kind of put that into like a number we can wrap our head around, because I think sometimes you hear a big number like that and it's difficult to understand it. I started looking up populations of places. So although I'm not in Oregon, I did look it up. The population of Oregon is 4.2 million. The population of Australia is 26 million, and the population of California is 40 million. So we still didn't quite get to that 46 million number, but I hope that just kind of puts it in perspective, just the sheer number of turkeys every year that do die for Thanksgiving. And then I included this. I'm a big fan of Farm Sanctuary. It's an organization, that I've had the opportunity to visit. We adopt or sponsor a turkey every year, and then we get this adorable little certificate. So this was the one that my kids adopted last year. And it's just, a nice connection back to my point of the why behind it. So now my kids have that, connection. They understand, why would we not want to serve turkey at Thanksgiving? Well, we would want to, rescue and sponsor a turkey so that they can continue lounging in our laps.
And if at this point you're wondering, well, gosh, if I don't have turkey, but I still kind of want turkey, what should I do? We have a whole vegan Thanksgiving menu that's downloadable on our website. I am constantly scouting the meat alternatives and doing taste tests on social media and on our YouTube channel. And so in this particular Thanksgiving feast here, I have one of the stuffed roasts that are available almost everywhere now. And now's the time that you're going to start seeing them popping up in the store. So definitely start experimenting with them. You can always check in with us and ask what our favorites are. My current favorite, although that might change this season because I bet there's going to be a lot of new stuff and I can't wait, is the Gardein breaded turkey cutlets. And the cool thing about that is those are usually available year round. There's 4 in a pack. They even come with a little gravy packet. I think there's 2 in there even. And I think they're fantastic.
And then baking. So that beautiful lemon meringue pie, and then there's a nice looking birthday cake. So the lemon meringue pie, the reason I put this up here is A, it's my favorite pie, and B, it is a traditionally egg heavy pie. My mom made this for us years and years and years when we were younger, and I vividly remember the amount of eggs that go into it. So it's a completely vegan lemon meringue pie. I just Googled vegan lemon meringue pie, found the first recipe and went with it. And to be honest with you, it was easier to make than the traditional original recipe. The other thing about that is the pie crust that it's in was just from the freezer section of the grocery store. It was one of those accidentally vegan products that, if you kind of start flipping over and looking at ingredients and labels on things, you'll realize, gosh, I don't have to worry about making a pie crust, whether I'm vegan or not. They already have them. And this one is accidentally vegan. So baking is definitely still an option when you're doing more vegan stuff. The chocolate birthday cake. So making anything like cupcakes, cakes, brownies, like bars, stuff like that. When you're thinking about eggs, a really easy switch for that is applesauce, or you can do a banana in place of an egg. There are also marketed like egg replacer that you can buy in the baking aisle if you wanted to just do something a bit more straightforward. But I find that using applesauce in place is perfect and has always worked. A few slides ago, we saw some of the products that Jules' sister really likes, and one of them was the Earth Balance. So if you really like to make a buttercream frosting, you can use Earth Balance for your buttercream frosting.
And similar to baking and holiday talk, there's also that little bit of fear maybe around hosting if you're cooking plant-based for non-vegans. I can assure you, I do this all the time. I have lots of non-vegan friends and family. And so what I usually try to do is find one of those recipes that's either accidentally vegan or close to, and something very familiar and crowd pleasing. And it is pretty much a slam dunk. On the left is a penny vodka night with some garlic bread. Garlic bread is probably accidentally vegan if you're using an olive oil, whatever method of garlic, and a French or Italian loaf of bread that should always be accidentally vegan, and so is ciabatta. So that is so easy to veganize. And then in the back there is that is actually a Caesar salad, but you can also easily do an Italian dressing. There's even store-bought versions that are plant-based and delicious. And so that was a crowd-pleasing night. And then over on the right was another crowd-pleasing meal where we had that fried shallot, roasted butternut squash salad with the creamy balsamic next to it. I just caution you, if you put your delicious creamy balsamic dressing next to your mashed potatoes, your brother might think that it is gravy, but then still eat it anyway, because that's how good that dressing is.
In restaurants, you know, everybody wants to be able to go out to eat, you know, connect with friends and family, or even just have like a simple to-go meal for dinner. So restaurants, there's so many vegan options now. Then there's the places that already had those quote unquote accidentally vegan. So a ton of Indian restaurants are going to have a lot of accidentally vegan dishes. The center picture is nachos from a food truck, and the cheese sauce on there was just a cashew cheese. The picture on the right is from a plant-based restaurant in Philadelphia called Veg. And it's more of like a high-end, completely plant-based, like really just sort of those like obscure ingredient type restaurants. So this sort of shows there's a wide range everywhere from, you know, Cheesecake Factory to Applebee's to your new local restaurant. There's going to be a vegan option, whether you can kind of create one with what they already have on the menu, or if you're, you know, wanting to, you can ask what they could make for you. And I know Jules has a really good example of that.
Yes. So I have been very lucky in my experience of dining out. Worst case scenario, just have some French fries and some beer. On the top right is a sandwich I ordered from Jackson's Corner here in Bend a couple of years ago. I walked in, I didn't see anything that seemed to be vegan on the menu. So I simply said that to the person that was taking orders. And she said, well, we can do something. How about portobello mushroom, tomato, avocado? Does that sound good? I said, absolutely. This beautiful sight is what came out to me with a side of potato wedges. It was fantastic. So don't be shy about asking. People are generally really accommodating, and pretty much every restaurant will have potatoes, avocado, bread, portobello mushrooms, and the possibilities there are endless. So you can always find something fantastic, and you won't be left out when you're eating plant-based when you're out and about. And on our website, we talk about all kinds of resources, our favorite products, and how to build your plant-based pantry. So that might in some ways look very similar to your current pantry. And then there are some really easy swap outs that we've been talking about: coconut milk. We talked about beans and cashews. Tahini is one of my favorites, which you can buy in a jar by the peanut butter and turn that into all kinds of things, especially creamy dressing we love to do. And I know we're short on time, so I won't get too much into this, but you can, like I said, visit our website under the More tab if you're on a desktop, and you'll see our favorite resources and our favorite products. And then, of course, you can always reach out to us with any questions.
I know we started the presentation with that blurry picture of lasagna, and we won't leave you hanging, but that lasagna is one of our recipes from our cookbook, Beefless Cakes, which is on our website. You can also find us on Amazon. All of the little layers to that lasagna are included in the cookbook, and it is a crowd pleaser, to say the least, for your vegan friends or your non-vegan friends. This will definitely leave them satisfied with their meal. And then for social media, we are on all of them. So YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, Pinterest. We don't quite know what we're doing on TikTok, but we're working on it. So feel free to help us, send us suggestions, or just follow us. And please send us, you know, what are you doing in your kitchen? What vegan things have you been trying? Jules mentioned the Taste Us videos. She's so good at them. So if you have a new product that you're curious about and you don't want to try it, send it to Jules, because she'll try it and then she'll give you her 100% honest review. But definitely check us out. We're always posting if we have an upcoming event, what we're doing, our new blog posts, all sorts of stuff.
And if you head over to our website at plantbasedpoint.com, you'll see a bright yellow pop-up. And if you give us your email, you'll automatically get a PDF download of a plant-based primer that'll really help you get going. And we promise, vegans, we generally don't like to create waste. So we certainly won't create waste in your inbox. We just have a monthly newsletter. And every now and then, if there's a timely announcement, we'll email you, but you won't be bombarded by any means. So definitely head over and sign up. And you'll also see on our website, we offer all kinds of things. We do these kinds of talks. We can come into your kitchen and do a cooking demo for you. And there might even be something you don't see on our website, but we'd be happy to work with you. So don't hesitate to ask. We are so passionate about this, and we love getting out there and meeting new people and talking about all things plant-based.
And we mentioned at the beginning that quote about kind of those small changes making a big impact. And so we wanted to just kind of put out our call to action. So, the next time you're in the grocery store, check out some of those vegan options. The picture of me, I'm holding a cheese sauce that I actually made out of potatoes and carrots and a whole bunch of spices. So you could try out something like that in place of your nacho cheese or, whatever snack item you have been buying from the grocery store. It's hard to see it, but every little change does make a big difference.
And I look very thrilled because I'm about to eat one of my favorite things in that photo, which is the plant-based chicken patty. That is such an easy swap, or something really simple to start out with trying. There's all different brands. My favorite is the Morningstar Farms chicken patty. They also have a buffalo chicken patty, which I think is phenomenal. And I feel really confident in recommending that to anyone that likes the breaded chicken patty. You will not miss the meat. And now we are open if there are any questions or comments, but we just want to thank everyone so much for your time. And let me know, Paige, if I should stop sharing.
This is great. Thank you so much, Jules and Robin. This was a wonderful look at some of the basics and also some really good tips and pointers about how you can go from the switch to a plant-based or vegan diet. So thank you. That was great. I'm gonna just recommend and throw that call out again to people in the audience. Please feel free to put your questions in the Q&A. But to kick us off here, I know that it's listed in the website, kind of your backstories for each of you, but just real quick, can you tell us, Robin and Jules, how long have you been doing this? I know that Jules mentioned she made the switch overnight. Robin, though, you mentioned that your mom cooked you, this beautiful egg-heavy lemon meringue pie when you were younger. So how did you make the switch? How long have you been doing it? Kind of tell us a little bit about your backstory.
Yeah, gosh, I probably should have mentioned it at the beginning, but yeah, that's a good point because I did love those lemon meringue pies. So probably from the age of 14 or so, I was vegetarian. So for a long, long time. And then right around the time I had my first son, who is 7.5 now. So about 7.5 years ago, we went vegan. So me and my husband, and then of course our son, William, and then my second. So just over 7 years, I've been vegan.
Yep. And for me, it was innocently hitting play on a documentary on Netflix, like you will often find me doing. I thought I was about to watch a documentary on just healthy eating, all natural eating, and it was called Forks Over Knives. And it had it's not graphic at all. I highly recommend it, Forks Over Knives, but it had just enough information that tied together what I had on my plate and where it was coming from, the factory farming side of things, that a connection I had never made. That was May 17, 2016. I will never forget. It was so impactful to me. I had been vegetarian when I was younger, so I think the seeds had been planted already, but it was so impactful to see that documentary in 2016 that I went vegan overnight. I know it pains people to hear this, but I actually threw out the filet mignon that was in my freezer. The last thing I had was a little bit of half and half in my coffee, and I realized I couldn't continue on the way I had been, knowing what I knew. And then I just dove head first, went and got a master's in humane ed, which is where I met Robin. So the change has been so transformative in such a positive way that I can't even imagine not having gone down this path.
That's fantastic. Wonderful. Thank you. So it seems like it was something that you two just felt that you knew was your right choice. How do you get your family members on board? How do you explain when your mom is calling and she wants to come over for dinner and you're like, well, yes, but you have to turn down that offer for her famous mac and cheese. And you say, well, actually, we're going a different direction. How do you have that conversation and bring friends and family into the fold gently?
That's a great question. And I sort of laugh because I feel like I just sort of tried to recruit people through food. And so I love to host people and have them over. And so I was like, yeah, I'll make everything. Don't worry about it. And kind of not even tell them what was going to be on the menu and have everybody over. Um, yeah, I mean, I definitely felt like having been vegetarian for as long as I was, I kind of had that aha moment where I was like, gosh, if I'm not eating meat, like, why am I still eating seafood or eggs or cheese? Like, what's the difference? You know, it's still an animal product. And so that was kind of my aha. My husband actually had a bit of a health issue, and so he went more for health reasons. And so that kind of became his aha. But truly, food has been the way to get people to see it, and it opens the door for that conversation. So, you know, Jules and I very much agree, you know, we don't want to pull out our soapbox and start yelling and screaming about, although, you know, we probably could, but we won't because we want to have a conversation and help, you know, folks make changes, and especially through education, because if you don't understand the why, it's really hard to make a big change. And so that's why, you know, a conversation over vegan mac and cheese goes over really well.
Yeah, definitely. And for me, my family, they are not vegan, but I have seen a tremendous arc in the conversations over the last 5.5 years, and an incredible openness in trying new vegan products. And I think it started out in that realm of like, oh boy, here's the crazy vegans coming over for Thanksgiving. This isn't going to be good. But I think they quickly learned that I wasn't going to be judgmental, and I'm here to answer questions, and that, oh my goodness, the food's actually really, really good too. So over the years, I have definitely seen friends and family who are not vegan be way more open to having a vegan meal, or they have been so accommodating in veganizing something because they know I'm coming over, and seem genuinely comfortable and happy with those changes. And so I think there's something to be said for that. And Robin and I definitely aren't here to try to tell anyone what to do, but more just be a resource.
I really appreciate how both of you are so open about everything, about sharing not only your love of food, but also sharing your recipes and your expertise. And like you mentioned, the non-judgmental way that you kind of bring people into that, which I agree with you, is always the best way to do that. So we have a question here. Which stores do you two frequent the most to find plant-based or vegan foods? You've mentioned Trader Joe's. Where else should people start looking?
So if that person who's asking happens to live in Bend, I would say jackpot, because this place is awesome for shopping. I am in love with Market of Choice. Then you've got Whole Foods, you've got Trader Joe's, you've got Newport Market, you got Fred Meyer. I shop at all of them. If I had to say, I'm probably most often at Trader Joe's or Market of Choice. There's Natural Grocers. I can't believe I forgot them. And that's nationwide as well. So if the person asking is not here in Bend, probably some of those sound familiar. And I know Robin's got a Natural Grocers out there in Iowa too.
Yeah. So when I first went vegan, I lived in Baltimore, and significantly more vegan options there than where I live now. So I have a bit of like a depression about the grocery store situation, but that's okay. I still get through it. It's fine. And then I hear Jules talk about all of her options. But I primarily do like Whole Foods and Trader Joe's. There's some local like chain grocery stores around me, which is, you know, obviously where you can find your like pantry items and things like that. But for produce, Whole Foods is pretty much the go-to. And then I do go to Aldi's from time to time. They have such good deals on things. They do have a small organic section, and they like sometimes have very random vegan items. A couple months ago, Aldi stocked their freezer with Beyond Meat burgers for pretty cheap compared to what they usually are. And so who knew? But yeah, so wherever I can go.
And that reminded me, Robin, that also even Walmart and Target have Beyond Meat and a lot of vegan products too. So no matter where you are, I think you can find stuff. And I don't think we called this out earlier, but we make a point to not share and create any recipes that require any really obscure, like all natural market products that you would only find at kind of a niche co-op. So that's another way we want to make everything really accessible.
That's fantastic. Yes, that accessibility is one of the main barriers that people experience. And as you mentioned, Jules, not everyone is lucky enough. Currently in Bend, Oregon, and not everyone is lucky enough to live with such a wealth of options. So thank you for sharing some other resources there. So speaking of the holidays, you mentioned kind of some of the big ones, Thanksgiving and Christmas, and some menus that you provide in your cookbook. One of my favorite holidays, though, is Halloween. And I know that, Robin, you have 2 kiddos. What do you do about Halloween and having 2 little vegan boys? How do you do trick-or-treating? How do you handle that? And similar to that, what about, birthday parties at school? Are those a thing anymore now that we're post-COVID? How do you handle that and working with the kids on understanding that when in the moment they're being presented with something that they can't eat that just looks so good?
Yeah, no, that's a perfect question, and absolutely can be a hurdle. So for Halloween, I just really believe in that why. That has to be for my, at least, and that's what works with my kids. It's not going to work with every kid, but that's just what works with my kids. I also just set the expectation. I say, hey, we're going to trick or treat. We're going to look at the candy afterwards. So, because, some candies are going to be fine and some aren't. I said, and then we're going to leave the other candies out. And so like that expectation of just knowing. The other thing I try to do, and sort of similar to the match your plate with your heart, is I talked to William about, why are we trick-or-treating? Why are we outside? Why are we together? It isn't necessarily about the candy. It's about the fun and being out past dark and looking at the moon and looking at the costumes and like the community piece of it. So trying to put more of an emphasis on the actual activity versus the candy. And I think that makes a difference. And so, we'll go through the candy at the end of the night. And then I always buy like a couple brands do some really good vegan candies. I know the Unreal brand has some really good vegan candies. And so if his pumpkin is lacking post my, sorting of things, I can always kind of dump in some extra things. So he'll have goodies. Even though I am, in the Midwest and some vegan options are hard to come by, there's an awesome group out here called Veg Life Des Moines, and they hosted a vegan trunk or treat last year. And so all of the people, decorated their cars, and we were able to take our kids. And I knew every candy was vegan. When it comes to like birthday parties and things like that. So it's really good timing, because I just got an email from his teacher that they're doing a birthday party next week and they're bringing in Rice Krispie treats. I was like, perfect. I have the perfect option to send in. The Made Good brand does the little like vanilla crispy squares. So they're basically the same thing. So I just emailed her back and let her know. It's truly just staying in communication with your kid's teacher. Like, hey, just let me know when there's something going on. I will send in something different. My youngest, who's in daycare, we just proactively took vegan ice cream bars and put them in the freezer at his daycare. And so if somebody just brings in something and they didn't know about it, that way and that's not going to go bad. It'll sit in the freezer, forever. So a little bit of planning and just some communication with the schools and just kind of letting them know. And I think with my oldest, because we do talk about it a lot, he would know to kind of be like, oh, can I have that? Can you ask my mom, type of thing. But we have navigated Chuck E. Cheese birthday parties and, all sorts of things where as long as I just chat with the parents who are hosting, we can always figure something out.
That is a great emphasis on the why the activity is happening rather than the food emphasis. And I really appreciate the way you put that. That's very well worded. So as you have probably seen a couple times, my apologies, I have pets. I have cats and they've been running around. Do either of you have pets? If so, how do you handle the vegan aspect and animals? Do you feed your animals vegan? How do we handle that for our loved furry family members?
So let me just answer mine, and then I'm going to let Jules take it away because she's got the best story, and Uncle Jesse happens to be on the screen. We have 2 cats, and cats are carnivores, and so they eat the cat food that they're supposed to. So that's kind of the long and short of it. And yep,
Yeah, and it is perfect that you asked about pets because we actually have a YouTube video about dogs and plant-based diets, and it is still very controversial, and we totally understand. We just want to start that conversation. So on the screen right now, you will see my bouncy, beautiful 11-and-a-half-year-old Labradoodle, Uncle Jesse. He has been plant-based for 5 years now, and he shows no signs of slowing down. And when I made this switch, I was definitely nervous about it. I did a ton of research. I talked to friends who had put their dogs on plant-based kibble and with great success. And so that was very reassuring to me. There's plenty of vets out there that will recommend it. The thing that pushed me over the edge to try it was learning that some of the most common foods that are put into kibble, like chicken and wheat, are actually the most common allergens for dogs. And so a lot of times non-vegan vets were prescribing a plant-based diet to dogs to help clear up conditions like skin conditions. So when I realized it wasn't just like an ethical discussion, and certainly how we source our pets' food is a real issue, no matter what you believe dogs should eat. It's definitely, there's some issues with how it's sourced. So we definitely want to be careful, of course, what we feed our beloved pets. And anyway, long story longer, I invested in a bag of VDog plant-based kibble. If you go to, I think it's v-dog.com, you can learn all about it. There's plenty of videos and research there. And I said to myself, well, if Uncle Jesse likes the new kibble, we'll run with it. We'll see how it goes. We'll see how his stomach is. And I combined the old meat-based kibble with the plant-based kibble, mixed them together. And when I came back, he had picked out all of the vegan kibble and only eaten the vegan kibble. So I was like, okay, the doodle has spoken. We're just going to run with this. And there were zero issues with his stomach. Like with the transition, it was just totally seamless. And he goes to the vet every year. Everything checks out wonderfully. So in my particular case, and of course, you'll want to do your own research, talk to your vet. But for Uncle Jesse, for sure, and for my other friends who have plant-based dogs, it's been a wonderful experience, and I feel really good about what's in this kibble that I give him. And I give him all kinds of other stuff like broccoli and sweet potatoes that he loves.
Yeah, I can speak to that. When I visited Jules and she fed Uncle Jesse, I was like, oh my gosh, he eats better than I do sometimes.
Yes, definitely. And speaking of eating better, we are kind of a little running over time here, but I just want to get a couple more questions. As a beginner who is trying to transition, it could be really an easy pitfall to fall into where you grab the convenience items, the prepackaged, the takes nothing but a heating, and it can sometimes contain additives. There's, for instance, all of these new milk alternatives, and you turn them around and there's just a long list of ingredients, some of which we can't pronounce. How do we navigate those tricky waters of not knowing what is best for us, trying to make the transition, and sometimes just not being able to make a meal every night? Do you have any last minute tips or comments or anything you'd like to share with the audience?
Yeah, I love what you said. I am a big believer. If you turn over the box of anything and you can't pronounce the ingredients, you probably shouldn't eat it. And I know that can wipe out probably 75% of the grocery store, but truth be told, if you walk through the produce section, you know what every single one of those items are. Apples, bananas, oranges, broccoli, celery, carrots, salads, soups, things like that. Those are the foods that are going to be the easiest to make. They're going to have the most nutrients in them. They're going to be the cheapest too. So an apple can be just as convenient as, a Pop-Tart. It's just all in the way we start to think about it. And if I'm taking 10 extra minutes to prepare my food at night and I already have my lunch for tomorrow, I probably won't get that, whatever from the vending machine. So just kind of thinking about it like that and making those baby steps. And I think Jules would agree. The biggest thing that we say is, well, what do you like to eat right now? How can we kind of veganize that? So if you like to make soup, which it's coming up on soup season, who's excited about that? I am. I will double my soup and then freeze half of it. And so I've literally got a lunch a week for the next 6 or 8 weeks. And the same could be said for any sort of casseroles, pot pies, lasagnas, things like that. If you take 2 hours on Sunday to make a couple meals, like you're set for the week, and then you won't, hit the drive-through line or, grab the stuff out of the vending machine and stuff like that. And my biggest piece to it is eat the foods that you know what they are, that don't have an ingredient list, like a banana or an orange or cucumber or whatever it is.
Yeah, Robin's the perfect person to ask that. And I always say, just try to set yourself up for success. And like we talked about, there's no perfection. So don't create a world where you say you're never gonna have a cookie again or a processed food again. Don't do it.
Yes.
Because then you're just going to be kicking yourself, and there's no place for shame in plant-based living. So yeah, definitely do it what works for you. And maybe that's a 15-minute like planning, prepping a few things in the kitchen versus a 2-hour batch cook. But figure out, what you can live with, what you can live without. And there's definitely plenty, I think, of convenience foods too that aren't loaded with scary stuff. So keep an eye out for that too, because there might be some bars and oat mills and things. Like overnight oats is a great thing you can make ahead of time and have that, and you know exactly what you're getting.
Yeah, definitely. And for anyone out there who's looking, of course, Robin and Jules have a beautiful, tasty, mouth-watering cookbook available for you at your Deschutes Public Library. You can also find it in any of their links, and I encourage you once again to go to their website and check out everything that they have to offer. Jules and Robin, thank you so much for being here today. This was fantastic. And I'm sure you saw in the comments, but I just want to point out in the Q&A, there were a couple of just thank yous from people saying hello and I'm connected with you before. So thank you to the audience for joining us this afternoon on this beautiful fall day to learn all about taking the mystery out of going vegan. Jules and Robin, I'm going to go ahead and let you go. Say thank you one more time.
Thank you.
And of course, we'd love to see you again in time. I'll look forward to running into you at the library. And to everyone else out there, check out DeschutesLibrary.org for all of your needs, books, movies, music, and more, and all of these wonderful presentations coming at you free at your library. Thanks again so much. Have a great day, everyone. We'll see you again soon.